Okay, this meeting is being recorded. I am super glad you're here. I want to make sure that this is helpful to you. So the main way that it's helpful is for you to make sure to ask whatever questions you have to ask, to use the chat. And, you know, I'll try to make this quick, but I will try to definitely hit some high points, try to touch on some things that will help make sure that you get the best grade possible, and that will also make sure that you prepare as well as possible for the exam. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. And this is basically, you know, what is on my mind. Students often ask, how can I earn more points? What else can I earn? So I want to briefly talk about that. Hopefully you are looking at your grades on Canvas. I try to be as transparent as possible. I want my students to know what's going on. What's going to be on exam 4. Again, there shouldn't be any surprises, but I'm definitely going to try to highlight a few things. And then, of course, anything else that you want to ask. Okay, so how can I earn more points? I have gone out of my way to set, I didn't change the due dates, but I extended the amount of time that these assignments are open, and I'm going to accept anything with no penalty till really late in the game. So it's kind of like I changed the due dates, but I didn't really change the due dates. So we'll talk more about exactly when they're accepted and why you might or might not want to do these. If you have not yet done some sort of office visit, or I also wrote people and said, just email me a check-in. Tell me how your other classes are going. Tell me what your plans are to succeed. I will still accept that if you just want to email me. I've already spoken with a couple people, for instance, on the phone today. We didn't have to have a Zoom chat. We just checked in about a few things. And those are 2 ways to earn just a few points. If you email me, remember to say in the email that this is for my extra credit, or I might just think you're sending me a neat little email to, you know, check in on me. I also said for folks who either missed a map quiz or didn't do as well as they wanted, that I would take your practice map quiz scores and convert them to your map quiz scores from when we originally took them in class. So keep that in mind, please. And you have to email me if you do that, because I don't have a good way to take those scores the way it's set up. So you have to email me and say, please check my practice map quiz scores. And there you go, I'll give you a better score. Surprisingly, there's still a few people who either haven't been turning these in or haven't turned in some of the past ones. Can people see my cursor when I run it around on the screen? Okay. Early on, somehow the cursor wasn't there, and then it freaked people out when I recorded videos. But so that's why I'm checking. So if for some crazy reason, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but if for some crazy reason you haven't turned in these, or you're thinking of not turning in one, you're losing out on a lot of points. So, and then I just added an extra credit discussion. So I was looking for a nice, neat, succinct video for you to comment on that's kind of sort of wrapped up the class. And I don't think I found exactly what I wanted, but I did find actually a little movie trailer. So 2 things about that. One is it'll get you points, extra credit, if you comment on the video. But the other thing is, honestly, I'm trying to figure out how to use discussions in my online classes. So it's helpful to me if you do that so that I can learn how to manage them and grade them. So, so there you go. I would appreciate you doing that discussion. It is linked pretty clearly right on our Canvas homepage for 306. And then there's this thing called exam insurance. You don't have to do anything for exam insurance. It will be automatically calculated, but just as a reminder, I take your 3 highest exam scores and I take the average. Then I subtract your lowest exam score and I give you back part of the difference. I can't remember if it's half or 25%, but I give you back part of the difference. So basically, it's my way of saying I'm going to trust your better performance rather than maybe the one time you had a bad day. But if all of your exams are exactly the same score, then your exam insurance comes out to zero, because in my head, you didn't need the exam insurance. So in any case, you can go read about it. It's straight in the syllabus. I'm not making things up. And then I already gave everybody their participation grade, and I gave everybody full credit. So you should have seen 20 points roll in at some point. So anybody thinking there was something else hiding there to earn points? I don't think so. Okay, so then when do I need these? Okay, all of these must be received before Thursday, May 21st at 11:59 p.m. And that is really late in the game, because I'm nice and because I know people are in a difficult situation. So normally I just wouldn't randomly extend virtually every due date till the last day of class, because I don't want to receive all of your work at the last second. But that said, I'll just take whatever comes in and I'll deal with it. If you're planning on doing something, then I would love it if you would do it sooner rather than later. What's going to happen is when this time comes around, everything's going to shut. I'm not going to accept any more points. And then if you are suddenly find yourself, in need of points, or you should have, you were planning on doing that one extra homework, and that's the difference between passing and not passing, or the difference between a C and a B or something like that, and you have a legitimate reason, okay, you could ask me about an incomplete grade. Now, I bring this up, this is kind of a weird situation, is all students have a right to ask for an incomplete. And this semester, of course, it's completely crazy. You can withdraw and get a W up until the last second. And if you're thinking of doing that, you should talk with me first. But the thing about an incomplete is they really leave it up to the discretion of the professor. And what would happen is if you told me, oh yeah, I had this crisis, I was planning on turning this in, or maybe it's a whole exam and something happened, then I would give you a grade of I, and then it asks me, what else is this student allowed to turn in? What other assignments did they miss? And you have to have a pretty good reason. You have to have some, life crisis or urgent situation or emergency. And then it also says, if this student does nothing, what grade should we give them? Like if they just walk away and do nothing. Well, it turns out you have a whole year. So I don't really like to advertise incomplete grades. I don't want students to rely on an incomplete, but you should all know that you always have a right to ask for an incomplete, especially if something crazy happens at the end of a semester. For various reasons, they don't want to advertise this at American River College because they don't want students all flooding in because they have some last minute crisis. So I give students incompletes on occasion, and the problem is a lot of people don't finish them up. So I'm just letting you know, you really should know that you have this right. I just wouldn't rely on it, because anybody want to guess how many of my students who take incompletes come back and finish them? Not a lot. So I'd rather people just really work hard and get the grade and be done. So anyway, so what about exam 4? Let me go back for a second. The other thing is that, if I go back to this page here, there's a lot of opportunities to earn points. And of course, I didn't even list homework, the exam 4 here. There's 100 points worth of exam 4. Well, all of you should know when you're checking your grade that whatever percentage it tells you is the percentage today. I can't tell you how often. Maybe I'll ask for your advice because I want to know how to fix this. I can't tell you how often students say, oh, but man, the system said I was getting a B, so I just felt good. Like, if you're getting a B right now, but class isn't over, that doesn't mean I'm just going to give you a B if you walk away. students somehow misunderstand this. So the system gives you a snapshot, percentage-wise, of what's happening right now. But what you really need to do is aim for points. So right there on the first page of your syllabus, what does it say? If you want to pass, you got to get 350. That's a C. That's 70%. So right now, you need to look at your points and decide what grade you think you can get, what grade you're going to strive for, how much work you're going to put in. And you know, at this point, it's really up to you. But you know, if you have 300 right now, and your only goal is to pass, well, you only need to get 50 more points. So your job is to look at how many points you currently have and what the target is that you want, and figure out the difference and figure out how many points you're going to get. I don't make it difficult. So many students will ask me, well, how many more points do I need? And you know, it's like, well, do the math. It's not that hard. Is how many points do you currently have and what grade do you want? So 400 points will get you a B, 450 points will get you an A. And you, let me say that I understand that students sometimes say that, oh, I didn't need to do homework 5 or homework 6 because I figured I was doing okay, but then maybe they don't do as well on the last exam and they come in just under what they wanted, and because they kind of gambled. I'm pretty serious about my grade cutoffs, okay? I'm pretty serious about my grade cutoffs. So it's not because I'm mean, but especially like for an A, if somebody's 2 points away from an A, I'm gonna look at their grade and I'm probably gonna see one of two things, okay? I might see a homework that they skipped or an opportunity to earn points that they skipped. And in my brain, I say, the person who wanted the A generally doesn't skip points. So it doesn't make me feel very sympathetic. Or if I look at it and I see somebody 2 points away from an A and they have earned every possible extra credit and they've done everything, which I love, it tells me that they probably earned a solid B, okay? Because I really throw in a decent amount of extra credit, and I want people who earn an A to have an A really be worth something. You know, ultimately my goal, I really try to make sure people pass, but when I hold a slightly higher standard when it comes to somebody earning an A. So my attitude is study really hard, and if you want those points, don't leave any points unearned. Don't leave any opportunity to earn a point left on the table because you were gambling and you didn't think you needed to do that. Okay, so that's my little soapbox. So exam 4, just real quick, let me jump over to this page. Hopefully this looks familiar. Some of you might have been there before. And this, by the way, is the link to the little discussion to earn extra credit. This is a summary of what you need to work on for exam 4. So I figured it's just easy for me to bring up what I have already posted to you just to be clear. So all of you should know I'm going to post the exam 8 o'clock Monday morning, and it'll stay open for like 2 days until Wednesday at the end of the day. So right there, that gives you the opportunity to manage your time to the best of, to what works best for you. So please make sure to be proactive and set aside a time that you're going to do this. Don't just say, oh yeah, I'll get to it at some point. Please set aside a very specific time to get this done. I'm going to set it for 3 hours. And please understand that if you start 2 minutes before it closes, you don't get 3 hours, you get 2 minutes. So you only get 3 hours if you start 3 hours before it's scheduled to close. Just want to be clear, some people don't get that. Also, I don't think it happened in your class, but you have to really make sure you should be using the Chrome browser. I had students on Apple devices that had problems reading some of the graphics that were built in. So I did some research, and even if you're on an Apple device, a Macintosh, you can download a Chrome browser for free. So that's just a heads up. And I forgot to mention that before. So, of course, what's going to be on there, and I will take a quick peek at this stuff. All the Exam 4 lecture notes, slides, videos, and sample essays that I gave you, probably in the ballpark of 50 multiple choice, 2 to 3 essays. But again, they're going to be essays that I have already given you. If you want to outline the essays and kind of pre-write an answer to some of the essays, I will be happy to take a quick look at it. So in other words, if you want to prepare beforehand and you want to make sure you're on the right track, then let me know. And I'm happy to take a look at that. It will be open notes, as I've said, but you are also expected to do a note sheet, and it doesn't really matter since it's open notes. I don't care if your note sheet is 1 page or not, but the whole point is, rather than hope, okay, that you can sit there and comb through your notes, you should actually study beforehand so that you're really familiar with your notes and aren't in a position to be hunting and pecking for answers to questions. I'm not going to ask you stuff that isn't covered in the notes, that isn't discussed in the videos, but I'm just telling you that huge problems arise when people just say, oh, it's open notes, I'm good, okay? You're not good unless you actually study and review your notes. So, and the same offer that I've done before is I will give you double credit for your notes, which means anything over 5 ends up being extra credit. So I'm going to stop there for a second. I will go into some of the notes just to do some highlights, to point to some things and try to give you a sense of how I'm going to test you on certain things. But I'm going to stop for just a second and ask who has questions. I'm going to take a look. Nobody's chatting with me, so I must be unbelievably crystal clear. Any questions or comments, anything off the top of your head? Either speak up or chat. A lot of head nodding sideways. Okay. I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna go back and share my screen again. And this time I am going to look for, wait a minute here. I'm gonna go back to this page, back to the modules. Okay, so remember module 4. And by the way, just out of curiosity, you can either give me a little thumbs up emoji within Zoom, or you can actually give me a thumbs up on your camera. Have the video lectures generally, do they seem pretty clear? Are people who are watching them seem like it tracks with the notes? Is anything distracting about the lectures? Because whatever, this is the first semester that I've done them, so they seem good. Okay. Is it at all distracting? Well, so when I bring up, like here we've got forecasting and then air pollution. So let me just bring up some of those notes really quick. Here we go. So like notes like this, when I bring these up on the video, does it end up being distracting? Or like when I highlight things, is that a reasonably comfortable way for you as a viewer to get the emphasis? Because what I don't want, thank you, what I don't want is people to like start getting distracted by trying to read every single word. But if you wanted to, I suppose you could. You have better access than a video to read these notes because you have the notes. You have access to the notes. Also, let me quickly ask if there was some way in the future that I'm doing this that I could also arrange for students to have printed notes or printed outlines like we did once upon a time in class. would it be useful as an online student to have any of this physically printed, like if you could order it from a bookstore, or nobody, you don't have any opinion on that?
If I may kind of just say something,
Yeah,
so packets are usually like very, very thick, and um, it's like kind of expensive to print it all out and all the ink. So maybe 'cause usually when I prepare for an exam, from what you like highlight, for example, exam 4, from what you highlight from the video, I would kind of highlight that in my notes and then print it out, because I know that you have, so that's like it's a shortened condensed version of the notes, but I still have everything else. It's just it's more condensed and I'm saving more paper, and I still like have the highlighted of what you highlighted in the video, if that makes sense.
yeah. I'm trying to think of the different situations that different students are in with different learning styles. And, I like me, all I can think of is I would, if I'm watching a video, I would really rather have something I could write on separately. Not many people have a screen big enough to have two files open or stuff like that, but I don't know, I guess that'll all come out in the wash. So again, remember, everything in the notes, thank you, Elizabeth, everything in the notes is totally fair game. But I do highlight some things to try to get you to focus, things that I want to emphasize. So in some cases, I'm not going to mention anything, like something like this, there might be a little matching section on the different agencies that I mention, okay? So I'm not going to have you write an essay question about the difference between the Storm Prediction Center and local forecast offices, but I wouldn't have a problem maybe having you match kind of what the different roles of these agencies are. I'd make it pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Here's another situation where I might have you do matching. So the different types of weather charts and weather maps tend to have different strengths and weaknesses in what they can tell a forecaster. So I might go in and I might pluck out the things that those particular maps are best at, and then have you do a matching question. So just a heads up. So here's something. This is really a lot of detail. I'm not going to expect some expert opinion and analysis on this level of detail, but the point here is for you to understand that modern forecasting is done by supercomputers doing hundreds of thousands of calculations over short spans of time using data from all over the world. So it's not something that somebody can it's something that you need to have experience in programming, in computer science, the atmospheric studies aspects of that. So in any case, anything is fair game. I'm probably not going to get into the weeds on this, so you should be familiar, but not a super amount of detail. I am interested in this idea of rules of thumb, like what does a forecaster do who takes the computer forecasts, but then they look at their own situation, like Dirk Verdorn is a local forecaster. He actually teaches this exact class. Hopefully you don't need to retake it in the fall, but if you know somebody who might be interested, he'll be teaching weather and climate in the fall. And what they will do is they will look at the temperatures that the computer tells them, and then they'll look at some of the local data and local situation that they might be more familiar with because they live there, because they study there, and they might adjust temperatures, and they might say, oh, it's going to be hotter than the computer says, it's going to be colder than the computer says. Same thing with precipitation. And then these are some basically non-computer forecasting methods. So you should know the difference between how someone might forecast using a supercomputer, which is the standard these days, versus ways that they might make weather predictions that are not necessarily computer-based. So this section is pretty short. As always, I have built some of your exam using the sample questions, so be sure to go through and not only know the answers to the questions, but to know why the answers are the answers. All of the answers should be supported by the notes. And then, of course, there are some essays. I will only take essays from the essays that I gave you. So let's see if this lets me close it. So there was forecasting. Let's see here. Where is the pollution note? Sorry. Forecasting. Does anybody see the file that says, oh, weather note air pollution? Here we go. So again, pollution is, the section is pretty straightforward. Understand that there is natural versus human pollution. And we didn't get too heavily into the idea of natural pollution, but volcanic ash, smoke, dust can be considered natural sources of pollution. And it actually turns out that often those things are useful in nature. To get a cloud, once upon a time, we learned about condensation nuclei. But here's what I really wanted to get into. And again, if I skip something, don't assume that's because it's not going to be tested on. I'm just trying to highlight some things. So what I did was I went through all of these different types of pollution, especially the ones monitored by the EPA, and I summarized them in this chart here. And so I made this chart available to you in a few different places. So what I've really tried to do is hone in on the fundamental basic differences between what these are, what are the sources, and why is it bad? Who does it hurt? What does it hurt? So I would say that this summary chart is probably a little bit easier to understand and follow than the actual notes right here. So keep that in mind. Again, I'm not going to re-lecture on these. Lead came up there. There is hardly anymore. There's hardly a problem with lead air pollution, because one of the most successful things they did was take it out of gasoline. It turns out it used to be in gasoline when I was growing up, because gasoline with lead in it, it turned out helped engines run better. It also basically polluted people and gave people toxic lead poisoning, which was kind of bad. So in any case, lead is kind of a tiny problem, but it used to be a really big problem. And we fixed it, which is a pretty big deal. Ozone. We had an entire homework mostly about stratospheric ozone, the good ozone, the helpful ozone. Surface ozone is just the opposite. It is terrible for human health. And so if you haven't already, your brain needs to totally understand the difference between the two. Surface ozone is a big deal on hot days, and it forms when sunlight and heat react with basically fumes, especially like gasoline fumes. Although this is natural, if you live in a place near a volcano, it's a big deal. Hawaii had some terrible air quality days during the really big eruptions a couple of years ago. So this is not something you'll ever personally need to deal with. Air quality trends, the basic thing is that it was terrible until about the 70s, and then we got serious about setting limits and cleaning up the air, and it got remarkably better because we all agreed that there should be some regulations put on polluters, big and small. So let's see here. I believe there is an essay question about this. So the idea of an inversion, it turns out, and I'm not going to re-lecture, but the slides show an inversion. The video talks about an inversion. Inversions can happen completely naturally, normally. It's basically a layer of warm air sitting on top of cold air. But what that does is it acts like a lid and it holds in all the pollution. So there have been some famous air pollution crises that really actually killed a lot of people because all the air pollution was being held in by an inversion. So you can go read a little more about that. Again, there's essay questions. So keep that in mind. And let's see, weather note. Climate change, one of the big things. Oh, that's the wrong one. That's a different file, sorry. Climate change, this is a PDF file. I really wanted to make, in short, I wanted to make the point that there are natural mechanisms of climate change. And this is what comes up when people debate this or think that it's somehow a controversy. Scientists are well aware that there are some mechanisms whereby nature has caused heating and cooling in the past. And people say, well, then what we're seeing right now is just Earth's natural cycles. And that is absolutely untrue, because it turns out, whereas we know about these natural factors, there is zero evidence that any of them are causing the current warming. So there's an essay question that touches on this. So I want to make sure that you understand that this paradox is, sure, nature can heat and cool by itself, but that's not what the evidence says right now is happening. So what's happening right now? Greenhouse gases. So it discusses carbon dioxide quite clearly, is increasing in the atmosphere over the same period of time that humans have been creating it. It's kind of hard to call that a coincidence. At the same period of time that we're seeing a gas known to trap heat increase when the actual temperature is increasing. So there is significant correlation between human CO2, atmospheric CO2, and heating that you just can't get around. No reasonable scientist would deny this. Also understand methane is an up and coming issue, and I discussed that in the notes. Currently, we are clearly seeing warming. And again, this last comment, I did it to really summarize and drive home the fact that the warming we are seeing now is incredibly strongly tied to human activity. And I'm not the person who blames humans. We did this in many ways without knowing it, but now that we know it, it would be irresponsible to not take action. But any discussion of this starts out with, yeah, even though nature heats and cools on its own, there's no evidence that that's what's happening now. And then you would go in and you would talk about correlation. So you see, I use the word correlation. Even if you said matchup, lineup, matches, any of those words help me understand that you know the situation. And are there any impacts? I've had students say, I like t-shirt weather. They want it warm. And there's a lot, it goes way beyond t-shirt weather. And again, I've tried to make that very clear in the slides. One of the big issues is sea level rise, which we're already seeing. A number of you did your homework and saw that California in particular certainly has the potential to be impacted by sea level rise and climate change in general. And then again, I'm going to let you look at what can be done. I do want to stress one thing. All of these things can be done to potentially slow down warming, but everything we're seeing says that we will continue to warm, and that much of the focus, again, if you did the homework, what you saw was they talked about the issues and then they talked about how to adapt. So much of the focus is, as a global society, as a country, how do we adapt for a warmer world? Well, you start looking at who lives close to the coast. What facilities do you have close to the coast? What infrastructure do you have near the coast? Where does our water come from? How are we going to readjust our water needs and our water supply? So, and then I will let you read about the no regrets philosophy. Um, and then there are some potential essay questions here at the end that are on your essay list. Last, so let me see, last one, whether no, here we go. So the world climate one, there will definitely be, so keep this in mind, there will definitely be references to the map. So I will have some simple maps and have you generally, I'm not going to get super picky, but generally identify different locations of different climate types. And a climate, a climate or a climate type is just a generalized pattern of temperature and precipitation. One of the best, if I jump down to these graphs, one of the best ways to show this in one simple graph is bar graphs for precipitation month to month to month. This is average precipitation. And then this little reddish line is average temperature. So make a goal for yourself to really see the differences in how these graphs are basically explaining real places in the real world. You should look at this and you should say, oh, that's tropical rainforest. That's a jungle, basically. Well, what do you see? You see the bar graphs show ample precipitation in every single month, and the temperature never changes. If you look over here, the temperature is always in the high 20s. It's like, what does that say here? Oh, it doesn't say in Fahrenheit, but it's like, it's in the high 70s all the time there. So make a commitment to be familiar with the graphs, because when I test you, I'm going to test you using these graphs. And I will probably take off some of this identifying information. So when I use a graph, I'm not necessarily going to show you where in the world it is. But like these two graphs here, they scream desert. They really scream desert. So please be prepared to have these show up on an exam and to be able to say, oh yeah, that's a dry location, and to know roughly where in the world you'd find a location like that, and also why. Notice that I kind of set all this up by what, why, where. So, what, that's easy, super dry. Why? This is a big one. We've touched on this, in different ways through the whole class. So high pressure kills clouds. Rain shadow deserts is a way to get dry locations, or a continental location far from the ocean. So, yeah. Mid-latitude climates. And I'm not going to make a big deal about well, you'll have notes, you can write notes. These letter codes, it's kind of an old-fashioned approach to categorizing different climate types. It's from a German guy, so a lot of these represent words that were originally in German. So honestly, I think these little codes are confusing, but just keep in mind that a map might use these little codes to identify where the locations of these different climates are. I like using the terms. So, and the reason I went and got my own climagraphs, I didn't use the ones from the book, I didn't use the ones from the textbook slideshow, is because they drop the graph on top of a map of the world, and my students are always confused about how the graph somehow relates to the map, and they don't. It's just convenient to put a map on there to show you where something is, and I've never found it to be anything other than completely confusing to students. So I just want to say you need to be most familiar with Mediterranean climates. You need to be an expert in Mediterranean climates because you live in a Mediterranean climate. So I want to make sure you can really answer these questions. What do they look like on a graph? Winter wet, so you see January, February over here, November, December. Summer dry, and obviously the winters are cooler, the summers are warmer. So this graph right here, you should recognize any version of that graph as a Mediterranean climate location. Generally dry, warm, hot summers, cool, wet winters. That's what it looks like in English. That's what it sounds like in English. This is what it looks like in the form of a graph. Mediterranean climates are very similar to marine West Coast, but it's kind of like comparing San Francisco to Juneau, Alaska. So marine West Coast is a lot more rain, but they do have drier summers. So do you see the slightly drier summer? How do I know this is summer? Because that little bump right there shows the temperature peaking. And I talk a little bit about humid subtropical in the video. You can look that up. These are much colder climates. I put less stress on these, but you should be able to look at these and understand that they're pretty cold locations. Find the 0 Celsius. So this has 3 or 4 months below freezing. This has 4 or 5 months below freezing. So that should give you a sense of where these are and what the conditions are. And then, of course, hopefully you would recognize climates that are at very high latitudes, very close to the poles. Look how cold this is. So here's 0. This is not that far from the South Pole. Virtually no precipitation. And how do I know this is at the South Pole? Look at that. When do they have winter? They have winter when we have summer. So this is also the type of thing that I would expect you to recognize if you were answering questions on an exam. Yeah. Oh, and this is a map that's very similar to some of the questions that you're going to get regarding climate locations. So keep that in mind. That's why I put this here, is you should very loosely be able to identify these locations. And yeah, I think that is everything in regards to all the content. So let's see, I think I stopped sharing. So what other questions? What, just envision like now through the end of finals week and grades, think about when you're setting aside time to study. Is there anything else that came to mind? You were studying and you hit a little roadblock. I want to make sure that you get your questions answered. Of course, anybody can email me anytime, but what else is on your mind?
Oh, I do have a question. So I was looking at the extra homework 5 and 6, and so I saw that one of them was WAC, the writing across curriculum, and so I took WAC this semester and I just finished it today. Can I have my instructor email you, or is that like separately?
Yeah, so I will, do you have, like, can you take a screenshot of Canvas or something like that? I hesitate to have you put it on an instructor because it might be an email that gets lost in the instructor. You know, normally, yes, that's the agreement I have with them. If you send me something that appears to be reasonable proof that you got through and you passed, screenshot or whatever, I'm just going to take it. But you got to upload that as your homework 5 or 6.
Okay. So you want me to submit it as a homework assignment rather than email you the screenshot of it?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, just like you can submit JPEGs or photos, you can submit photos the same way you can submit a file. I just need some evidence on my file, and it's way better if it's in Canvas because I might just lose the email. If it's in Canvas, then I can look at it and I can give it a grade and it's magic. You know, if it's an email, then I got to go get my email and then I got to open up Canvas, and it's a needless extra step. And then I don't know if I stress this, but let me just remind you, hopefully I made this deal about you can only get 50 total points for homework. Okay. So, if you've done 5 homeworks and you've got 49 out of 50, whatever else you do, I'm only going to give you 1 more point. So you might want to pick a homework that looks like really short, and you know, I'll probably give you a point if there's any evidence you tried at all. I just don't want somebody to be mad at me because they turned in the best assignment of their entire life and I only give them 1 point for it. All right, good. What else? Everybody understands all of your potential remaining point earning opportunities. You've mapped out a road to success. I am sorry we can't all be in the same place at the same time. I wish everybody luck getting through all this with all your plans, and please, please stay in touch one way or the other. I would appreciate hearing from you. Nothing makes my day more than hearing from a student semesters later that you got a job or you're doing something cool or fun. Doesn't even have to be weather or geography. I don't care.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. All right. Well, I'll part ways. If anybody has any last minute questions, I'm meeting another class at 8 o'clock. So, and again, if anybody wants the 3 points of office visit, then we can just, quickly Zoom or chat on the phone. You give me some times you're available, give me a phone number, and we'll quickly take care of that. So, all right. Thanks for coming.
All right. You have a nice day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Eat dinner, all that fun stuff.
I'll try.